let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem.
All right, you guys see how these things link together? I mean, right after the decree is given to Daniel, the next book in the writings is Ezra, then the decree is given for them to go and rebuild. And so now they're here, and they're, look at chapter 2, look at what are, chapter 2, verse 1 forward. Now these are the people of the province who came up out of captivity of the exiles, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away to Babylon and returned to Jerusalem and to Judea, each to his city. These came with Zerubbabel, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you see all these numbers? All these, this is the sons of Elam, 1,200, the sons of Zatu, 945, the sons of Zekiah. What is all that? Tons of exiles returning, right? Mm-hmm. You guys see that? I mean, this makes perfect sense in my mind. The exile, it says that you're going to return, you're going to rebuild. Here we have them returning, we have them going back. The whole book goes through tons of people returning. There's so much that's going on here. That's we're going to try and walk through Ezra and Nehemiah as quick as we can. But yeah, tons of people returning, just like everything's been said that would happen. Look at chapter 3. Let's look at. I got a few things underlined. Chapter 3, 1 and 2. Now, when the 7th month came and the sons of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered together as one man in Jerusalem. Then Jeshua, the son of Jehozadak, and his brothers, the priests, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and his brothers arose, and they built the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. So now they rebuild the altar. Soon they start rebuilding the temple, and if you'll look at chapter 3, verse 12 through 13, this is very important. What we're going to try and start taking note of this. Someone read those verses.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it said.
3, 12 through 13.
Yeah, read that.
Yet many of the priests and Levites and heads of fathers' households, the old men who had seen the first temple, wept with a loud voice when the foundation of this house was laid before their eyes, while many shouted aloud for joy. So that the people could not distinguish the sound of the shout of joy from the sound of weeping of the people. For the people shouted with a loud shout, and the sound was heard far away.
So what's the problem with this temple?
It's tiny.
Yeah, it's not. So now they're back in the land. Okay, the temple's there, but it's not good like the original temple. So now you have people weeping because the temple's not good. So we're going to take note of all these facts. Let's see, chapter 4, verses 5. Chapter 4. Look at chapter 4, verse 4 and 5. Then the people of Judah. Then the people of the land of Judah. Then the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and frightened them from building, and hired counselors against them to frustrate their counsel all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, the king of Persia. I'm pointing this out because in Daniel 9 it says that I believe that Cyrus is going to be the one who gets all this done, and then right here Darius, he's king, but then the people of the land stop Judah from rebuilding the temple. Well, then Cyrus shows up later, just like Daniel's talking about, and then continues rebuilding. So I'm just pointing that out for small notice. Look at chapter 5, verse 1. When the prophets, Haggai, the prophet, now in Haggai, I mean, that's one of the minor prophets. This is where Haggai fits into the whole story. If you go read Haggai, it's this guy right here who's part of the rebuild. Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Odo prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them. Then Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and Jeshua the son of Jozadak, arose and began to rebuild the house of God which is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. So now they're back. They're rebuilding the temple, all that good stuff they're trying to pull off. Okay, chapter 6, verse 14 and 15. And the elders of the Jews were successful in building through the prophecy of Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, son of Iddo, and they finished building according to the command of the God of Israel, and the decree of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. The temple was completed on the third day of the month of Adar, is the 6th year of the king of Darius. So you've got Artaxerxes, who I think is the king in the book of Daniel, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. It might be Darius. But anyway, all three of these guys, they're lining up, and the temple's complete, just like supposed to happen. Okay, then you have in chapter 7, you have Ezra showing up. In chapter 7, verse 6, this Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was a scribe skilled in the law of Moses, which the Lord God of Israel had given. The king granted him all that he requested because the hand of the Lord was with him. So Ezra shows up. Okay, if you look at chapter 8, that's what I'm saying. I'm skipping through this. You have what I would say more people returning. Now, verse 1, now these are the heads of the fathers of the household, the genealogical enrollment, those who went up with me, the king of Babylon, the reign of King Artaxerxes, the son of Phinehas, Gershom, sons of Ithar, Daniel, sons of David, of the sons of, it's going through, and it has a whole list of people again, so you've got all these people that are coming. Okay, look at verse 21 and 22 of chapter 8. Then I proclaimed a fast there at the river Abba, and that we might humble ourselves before our God and seek from him a safe journey for us and our little ones. For I was ashamed to ask the king for troops and horsemen to protect us from the enemy on our way. So they're heading to Jerusalem or whatever, and they're praying that everything will go well. Okay, look at chapter 9, verse 1. This is going to play in. Now, when these things have been completed, the princes approached me, saying, the people of Israel, the priests, and the Levites have not separated themselves from the people of the lands according to the abominations of those of the Canaanites, the Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, Ammonites, Moabites, Egyptians, Amorites. Here in chapter 9, what is Israel still doing? They're still married to Canaanites, and they're still taking part in the harlotry. Okay, so that's a problem here. We're going to take note of these little details. By the end of Ezra and Nehemiah, you guys are going to see what's going on. These details are here for a reason. Look at verse 7 of chapter 9. He's talking about all this. He says, since the days of our fathers to this day, we have been in great guilt on account of our iniquities. Our kings and our priests have been given to the hands of the kings of the land, to the sword, to captivity, plunder, and open shame as it is this day. He's talking and he's saying, look, because y'all are intermixed and all this stuff, we've been, kicked out. We've been put in captivity because of all this sin, and we're still doing it today. Okay, and then Ezra pretty much ends. If you look at chapter 10, there's a bunch of other Levites and all this showing up. Okay, turn to Nehemiah. Okay, Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 8 and 9. Remember the word which you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though those of you have been scattered were in the remotest part of the heavens, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place where I have chosen to cause my name to dwell. So he's talking, Nehemiah's talking, or whoever it is talking, and he's where's he quoting from? Deuteronomy 29, right? Mm-hmm. He's pulling back to Deuteronomy 29. He's saying, hey, you remember you said you're going to scatter us, but you'll gather us later. I'm just showing you that motif's moving on. Okay, so in Nehemiah, you've got Israel back in the land, and we're going to skip to the end of this one because of... so you guys will see what's going on. Okay, turn to let's go with chapter 8 of Nehemiah. This is where it gets good. Chapter 8, someone read verses 1 and 2.
And all the people gathered as one man at the square which was in front of the water gate. And they asked Ezra, the scribe, to bring the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had given to Israel. Then Ezra the priest brought the law before the assembly of men, women, and all who could listen with understanding.
Keep
On
reading.
the first day of the 7th month. He read from it before the square which was in front of the water gate, from early morning until midday, in the presence of men and women, those who could understand, and all the people were attentive to the book of the law. Ezra the scribe stood at a wooden podium which they had made for the purpose.
Okay, you can just stop there. So what are they reading now?
The book of the law.
They're standing in the temple square. They've been brought back. They're in the land, and they're reading from the Torah. Okay, and this is great because you guys are going to see pretty much exactly what's going on. Verse 8 says, they read from the book, from the law of God, translating and giving the sense as they sense so that they understood the reading. And so they're trying to explain it. Okay, look at, someone read verse 14 forward. William, just keep reading.
They found written in the law how the Lord had commanded through Moses that the sons of Israel should live in booths during the feast of the 7th month. So they proclaimed and circulated a proclamation in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, go out to the hills and bring olive branches and wild olive branches, myrtle branches, palm branches, and the branches of other leafy trees to make booths as it is written. So the people went out and brought and made booths for themselves, each on his roof, and in their courts, and in the courts of the house of God, and in the square at the water gate, and the square at the gate of Ephraim. The entire assembly of those who had returned from the captivity made booths and lived in them. The sons of Israel had indeed not done so from the days of Joshua, the son of Nun, to that day, and there was great rejoicing.
Okay, so just now think about that statement. They were commanded to do this in the law of Moses. It said it had not been done from the day of the son of Joshua. Like, that's the second guy after Moses is gone. Moses leaves Joshua, and they never did it. So now, for the first time, they're actually trying to do what the law says. That's amazing to me. All right, and keep reading chapter 9, William.
Now on the 24th day of this month, the sons of Israel assembled with fasting, and sackcloth, and with dirt upon them. The descendants of Israel separated themselves from all foreigners, and stood and confessed their sins and the iniquities of their fathers. While they stood in their place, they read from the book of the law of the Lord their God for a fourth of the day. And for another fourth they confessed and worshipped the Lord their God. Now on the Levites' platform stood Jeshua, Bani, Kadmiel, Shabani, Bunai, Sherebiah, Bani, and Kenani. And they cried with a loud voice to the Lord their God. Then the Levites, Jeshua, Kadmiel, Bani, Hashabaniah, Sherebiah, Hodiah, Shebaniah, and Pathahah said, arise, bless the Lord your God forever and ever.
Now remember, it says they were reading from the book of the law in verse 3 right now. Notice this. Look what they say. Keep reading, William.
Oh, may your glorious name be blessed and exalted above all blessing and praise. You alone are the Lord. You have made the heavens, the heaven of heavens with all their hosts, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to all of them, and the heavenly host bows down before you. You are the Lord God who chose Abram.
So what chapter 6, what did that reflect?
Creation.
Yeah, Genesis 1, right? Okay, keep reading.
And brought him out from Ur of the Chaldees, and gave him the name Abraham. You found his heart faithful before you, and made a covenant with him to give the land of the Canaanite, of the Hittite, and the Amorite, of the Perizzite, the Jebusite, and the Girgashite, to give to his descendants, and you have fulfilled your promise, for you are righteous.
Now let's stop right there. Where else is he reading?
From the covenant.
Yeah, this is straight out of the Torah. They just read it, and what they start doing? Creation, Abraham, and it goes all the way through Exodus. It just keeps going. And it says, and you have fulfilled your promise. So did he fulfill the promise of giving them the land, all that stuff I've talked about? Yeah, he did. It was fulfilled, just like Joshua said. Okay, keep reading.
You saw the affliction of our fathers in Egypt, and heard their cry by the Red Sea. Then you performed signs and wonders against Pharaoh, against all his servants, and all the people of his land. For you knew that they acted arrogantly toward them, and made a name for yourself, as is this day. You divided the sea before them, so they passed through the midst of the sea on dry ground. And their pursuers you hurled into the depths, like a stone in the raging waters. And with a pillar of cloud you led them by day, and with a pillar of fire by night, to light for them the way in which they were to go.
So what is that?
Exodus.
Exodus.
Following the
Oh my goodness. This is great. All right, keep going.
Then you came down on Mount Sinai and spoke with them from heaven. You gave them just ordinances and true laws, good statutes and commandments. So you made known to them your holy Sabbath, and laid down for them commandments, statutes, and laws through your servant Moses. You provided bread from heaven for them for their hunger. You brought forth water from a rock for them for their thirst. And you told them to enter in order to possess the land which you swore to give them. But they, our fathers, acted arrogantly. They became stubborn and would not listen to your commandments. They refused to listen and did not remember your wondrous deeds which you had performed among them. So they became stubborn and appointed a leader to return to their slavery in Egypt. But you are a God of forgiveness, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love and kindness. And you did not
All right,
forsake them.
that quote for gracious, compassionate, slow to anger, abundant in loving kindness, where's that at? Exodus 34:6, when he reveals himself to Moses. You guys, I mean, this is literally, he's just walking, they're walking through the whole Torah. This is great. We have like exegesis straight from the Torah right here, so keep going.
Even when they made for themselves a calf of molten metal and said, "This is your God who brought you up from Egypt," and committed great blasphemies, you in your great compassion did not forsake them in the wilderness. The pillar of the cloud did not lead them by day to guide them on their way, nor the pillar of fire by night to light for them the way in which they were to go. You gave your good spirit to instruct them. Your manna you did not withhold from their mouth, and you gave them water for their thirst. Indeed, 40 years you provided for them in the wilderness, and they were not in want. Their clothes did not wear out, nor did their feet swell. You also gave them kingdoms and peoples, and allotted to them as a boundary. They took possession of the land of Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and the land of Og, the king of Bashan. You made their sons numerous as the stars of heaven.
Okay, what?
The stars of heaven.
Where, do you guys remember all I've talked about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Genesis 15. Was that fulfilled? Yeah, I would say. I mean, that's my whole argument from week 3 or whatever. Yeah, you made. Keep going.
And you brought them into the land which you had told their fathers to enter and possess. So their sons entered and possessed the land, and you subdued before them the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, and you gave them into their hand with their kings and the peoples of the land to do with them as they desired. They captured fortified cities and a fertile land. They took possession of houses full of every good thing, huge cisterns, vineyards, olive groves, fruit trees in abundance. So they ate, were filled, and grew fat, and reveled in your great goodness. They became disobedient and rebelled against you, and cast your law behind their backs, killed your prophets, and laid a bondage them.
All right, so what are they looking at now?
The prophets.
Yeah, they're switching over. We've killed their prophets. Keep going.
So that they might return to you, and they committed great blasphemies. Therefore you delivered them into the hand of their oppressors who oppressed them. But when they cried to you in the time of their distress, you heard from heaven, and according to your great compassion, you gave them deliverers who delivered them from the hand of their oppressors.
What book's that?
Judges.
Keep going.
But as soon as they had rest, they did evil again before you. Therefore you abandoned them to the hand of their enemies, so that they ruled over them. When they cried again to you, you heard from heaven. And many times you rescued them according to your compassion, and admonished them in order to turn them back to your law. Yet they acted arrogantly, and did not listen to your commandments, but sinned against your ordinances, by which if a man observes them, he shall live. And they turned a stubborn shoulder, and stiffened their neck, and would not listen. However, you bore with them for many years, and admonished them by your Spirit through your prophets. Yet they would not give ear, therefore you gave them into the hand of the peoples of the lands. Nevertheless, in your great compassion you did not make an end of them or forsake them, for you are a gracious and compassionate God. Now, therefore, our God, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who keeps covenant and loving kindness, do not let all the hardships seem insignificant before you, which has come upon us, our kings, our princes, our priests, our prophets, our fathers, and all your people, from the days of the kings of Assyria to this day. However, you are just in all that has come upon us, for you have dealt faithfully. We have acted wickedly. For our kings, our leaders, our priests, and our fathers have not kept your law or paid attention to your commandments and your
All right, we're going to have to move on for sake of time. Look at verse 38 and read that.
Now, because of all of this, we are making an agreement in writing, and on the sealed document are the names of our leaders, our Levites, and our priests.
Keep going.
You want me to, all right, chapter 10?
Yeah, chapter 10. Just remember there aren't no chapters in the real text, so just keep
Can we
rolling.
skip all the names?
Yeah, we are. Just read the first verse. We're going to skip all that.
Now the sealed document were Nehemiah, the governor, the son of Hakala, and Zedekiah.
Okay, so tell me, what did they just do? They just
I mean, you just
Thank
read
you,
the
William,
whole
for reading.
chorus. Give me a break here, let's
listen. We don't have time for shenanigans. We got to keep rolling. Okay, so now they're making a document and signing it, right?
Yeah.
And they're saying, so this document, and it's saying, and I'll read verse 28. Now the rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, singers, temple servants, and all those who separated themselves from the people of the land to the law of the God, their wives, their sons, their daughters, all those who had knowledge and understanding, are joining with their kinsmen, their nobles, and taking, verse 29, look at this, taking on themselves a curse and an oath to walk in God's law, which he gave through Moses, God's servant, to keep and to observe all the commandments of the Lord our God, and all his ordinances and statutes, that we will not give our daughters to the people of the land, nor take their daughters for our sons. Okay, as for the people of the land, okay, so what are they going to do? They're signing a document, putting themselves under the curse of the law of Moses, right? I mean, that they're putting themselves back in the law. It says we're not going to, first off, he says we're not going to intermarry. How do you spell that? Is it R-R-Y?
Yeah.
Intermarry, 1. Okay, 2. It says, verse 31, as for the people of the land who bring wares and any grain on the Sabbath, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath on the holy day. So they're not gonna deal on the Sabbath. All right, verse 32, we will place ourselves under obligation to contribute every year 1/3 of the shekels for the service of the house of the Lord. So 3, they're going to pay for, right, the Levites, all that stuff, pay tithe. And let's see. With that being said, they're putting themselves under the law of Moses, which is a terrible thing, because that's not good, okay? They've signed this document. They just went through the whole Torah and all that. And they're saying, all right, we're going to do it. We're going to be for real this time. This is like the birth of the first Pharisees. But anyway, keep going. Chapter 13, verse 1. On that day, they read aloud from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people. And there was found written that no Ammonite, Moabite should ever enter the assembly of God, because they did not meet the sons of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. However, our God turned the curse into a blessing. So they heard the law and they excluded all foreigners from Israel. And so now they've got this exclusion of foreigners from the temple.
So much for Ruth.
Okay, so they go through it, they sign it, we're going to do this, we're not going to intermarry, deal on the Sabbath, pay tithes, foreigners aren't going to be in the temple. All right, so with that being said, look at, let's see, we'll keep reading, chapter 13, verse 4. Now prior to this, Elishab, the priest, who was appointed over the chamber of the house of our God, being related to Tobiah, had prepared a large room for him, where they had formerly had grain offerings and frankincense and utensils, blah, blah, verse 6. But during all this time, I was not in Jerusalem for the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon. I had gone to the king. After some time, however, I asked leave of the king. I came to Jerusalem, and I learned about the evil that Elishab had done to Tobiah by preparing a room for him in the courts of the house of God. So who's living in the house of God?
Tobiah?
Yeah, a foreigner. It just said we're not going to do this. And now you have a foreigner living in the house of God. So here we go. Let's strike 1. Okay. It was very displeasing to me, so I threw all Tobiah's household goods out of the room. Then I gave order that they be cleansed. Okay, verse 10, I also discovered that the portions of the Levites had not been given to them, so that the Levites and singers who had performed the services had gone away each to his own field. So what just happened?
They broke the tithing law already.
Strike 2.
And the Levites forsook the temple.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Verse 15. In those days I saw in Judah some who were treading wine presses on what?
The Sabbath.
Bringing sacks of grain and loading them on donkeys, and they brought them to Jerusalem on the Sabbath. So I admonished them. So now what's happening? They're working on the Sabbath.
On the Sabbath.
Yeah, and we'll just look down at verse 21. I warned them and said to them, why do you spend the night in front of the wall? If you do so again, I will use force against you. From that time on, they did not come on the Sabbath. So now you have people.
This is Ezra speaking,
Yeah,
right?
this is Ezra. Yeah,
No,
people-
it's Nehemiah.
Or Nehemiah,
sorry,
sorry.
yeah.
Sorry.
People dealing on the Sabbath, strike 3, all right. Verse 24, as for the, 23, in those days I saw Jews who had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Their children half spoke in the language of Ashdod, and none of them was able to speak in the language of Judah, but the language of his own people. So I contended with them, I cursed them, and struck some of them, and pulled out their hair, and made them swear by God, you shall not give your daughters or your sons, nor take your daughter. Okay, what happened right here?
Pulled her hair out.
Strike 3. So tell me, how's this following of the law going?
Not so
Very
well.
mean.
It's not. Okay, so who do we need to show up that Daniel talks about?
The Messiah, the Prince.
Yeah, you see how Ezra's ending here? We need the Messiah to show up. This is bad. The book ends in total colossal failure. They're back in, and here again, this is the main point. When God so they've been returned, they're there just like God had said would happen. Okay, but the Messiah hasn't showed up. Okay, and what hasn't happened to their hearts? It hasn't been circumcised yet. You guys see that? It's not there. They're back in the land just like God said, but now we're waiting for their hearts to be circumcised. We're waiting for the Messiah to show up.